He was taken before he even understood what desire was. In the golden palaces of Rome, behind silk curtains and marble statues, young boys were turned into gifts and forgotten names. But one of them, Julian, remembered the sea, remembered freedom, and remembered every man who tried to take it from him. What began as submission would become something Rome could never control. Watch until the end to discover how one lost boy became the voice of hundreds. They told him his name was Fortis now, but that wasn't the name his mother gave him. He still remembered her voice, soft and breathless, whispering Julian as she brushed his hair back on the fishing boat. They lived in a small port town near Tarraco, poor, sunburnt, but together. Until the soldiers came. Julian was 10. The recruiter said he had the look. Big eyes, straight teeth, quiet. Don't worry, they told his mother. He'll be trained to serve nobility. He'll be safe. He'll eat better than you ever could. They gave her 2 silver coins. That was the last time Julian saw her. The transport wagon had no windows. He and 4 other boys were gagged and bound until they crossed the mountains. One boy cried so much they knocked him unconscious. Another wet himself. Julian just stared at the walls, refusing to blink. He wanted to remember everything. When they arrived in Rome, they were bathed in perfumed water, scrubbed until their skin bled. Their hair was oiled. Their teeth inspected. Then the collars came, leather bands with Roman numerals burned into them. Julian's was 17. That night they took their clothes and gave them soft tunics that felt like lies. You belong to the Domus Aurea now, a woman told them. This is not a brothel. You are companions. Trained. Valuable. The others nodded. Julian stayed silent. They called him Fortis, the strong one, because he didn't cry. But inside he was breaking. In the weeks that followed, they were taught posture, silence, how to pour wine without sound, how to kneel gracefully, how to recognize powerful men by their sandals. Their bodies became rehearsals. Their faces masked. Julian watched everything. Listen. At night, he curled under the blanket and whispered his real name to himself. Over and over. So he wouldn't forget. Then came the day of the first selection. Patrons arrived. Senators, generals, men with too many rings and eyes that never blinked. They walked down the line of boys, touching faces like merchandise. One of them stopped at Julian. This one, he said. I want him for the banquet. Julian's heart beat so loud he thought it might tear through his chest. The handlers nodded. And that night, he learned what the word companion truly meant. They gave him wine to loosen him. Ointments to remove every trace of childhood. The room was gold and red, the cushions too soft, the man too old. When it was over, he lay on the floor, alone, staring at the ceiling. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He just whispered, My name is Julian. My name is Julian. And in that whisper, something survived. Not innocence, but memory. And one day, memory would become fire. Julian wasn't the only one. There were many. Each day, new boys arrived. Some from Gaul, others from Numidia, Thrace, or Hispania. They came scared, injured, sedated, or numb. Each was stripped of his name, rebranded with a Roman number, and trained in silence. They were called pueri delicii, delight boys. To the city above, they were invisible. To the Domus, they were luxury. Julian noticed early which ones left and never returned. It happened quietly. A patron would request a companion for a private event. A boy would be washed, dressed, scented, and then, nothing. His cot remained empty. His cup untouched. His name, forgotten. Some whispered they were retired. Others claimed they had been gifted to foreign dignitaries or sacrificed in secret imperial rituals. Julian didn't believe any of it. He believed they were broken. And discarded. The fear of becoming one of them sat heavy in his gut. But Julian adapted. He learned how to read men's faces. The signs of anger in a clenched jaw, of danger in the eyes that lingered too long, of safety in the presence of witnesses. He played the role so well they called him Domitus, the tamed one. But he wasn't tamed. He was patient. And he wasn't alone. There was one boy, Cashion. He was a year older, darker-haired, with a thin scar along his cheek and eyes that never left Julian's. They had arrived weeks apart, but the handlers never put them in the same room. Even the Domus seemed to sense something between them. Still, they found ways to speak. In the baths, they passed messages through steam. In the kitchens, a brush of fingers said more than a page. Julian learned Cashion had once been the son of a freedman, taken after a debt could not be paid. My father tried to stop them, Cashion had whispered once. They broke his hand. Julian nodded slowly. Mine sold me. Cashion didn't react. At least yours is still alive. That was how they bonded. Not through shared love, but shared ruin. One night, Cashion snuck into Julian's chamber just before lockdown. They sat on the cold stone floor, backs pressed to the wall. "Do you remember what your house smelled like?" Cashion asked. Julian closed his eyes. "Salt. Seaweed. Wet nets." Cashion smiled. "Mine smelled like boiled barley. And ash." They didn't speak of the men. Not that night. They just sat, imagining they were far away, on a boat or in the mountains or anywhere but beneath this golden cage. Julian asked, "Do you think we'll die here?" Cashion was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Not if we choose the right moment." That phrase would become their pact. In the weeks that followed, they plotted quietly. They traced guard rotations. Noted when Livia, the Domus overseer, left her quarters for the Senate evenings. Cashion stole a piece of parchment from a merchant's sleeve. Julian swiped a wax seal from a distracted handler. They didn't know exactly what they were planning. But they knew they were planning something. Something dangerous. Something final. Something worthy of all the boys who had never come back. The feast was for a general returning from Germania. The Domus prepared for days, floral oils, fresh fabrics, and rare figs. Livia ordered the best boys forward. "No blemishes. No bruises. And smile like you're grateful to be alive," she barked, clapping her gold rings against her palm. Julian was chosen. So was Cashion. They had never been assigned to the same client before. But that night they were both summoned for the same chamber, the Ember Room, a place known for excess and silence. No music. Just flame, wine, and whispered commands. They were bathed, oiled, and robed in matching red silk. Gold chains wrapped around their ankles, aesthetic, the handlers said. They were told to walk slowly, heads bowed. Julian glanced at Cashion as they passed through the marble corridor. Cashion didn't look back. The Ember Room lived up to its name. It glowed, low and soft, like a furnace that never cooled. On a raised dais reclined the general, drunk already, his voice echoing through the columns as he barked about conquest and loyalty. Livia stood nearby, smiling like a priestess of Venus. The general pointed to Julian. "You. Come here." Julian stepped forward. The man pulled his chin up with 2 fingers. "You've been trained well." He then turned to Cashion. "You too. But let's test your loyalty." Julian's blood turned to stone. A guard entered. He carried a whip and a set of thin bronze rods. "Choose," the general said, laughing. "One will receive it. You get to pick, boy." Cashion stood frozen. Julian spoke quickly, clearly. "He's sick, Dominus. He's bled recently." Livia narrowed her eyes. The general grinned. "Fine. Then you take it." The first strike came without warning. Then another. And another. Julian stayed upright, but his back was fire. He did not cry out. Cashion stared, fists clenched at his sides. When it was done, Julian collapsed. And the general, bored already, waved them away. "Take them out. I want music now. The boys make me feel old." They were dragged from the room. Livia didn't say a word. Back in the sleeping chambers, Cashion cleaned Julian's wounds with wine-soaked cloth. He moved slowly, carefully, never speaking. Until Julian whispered, "He's a pig." Cashion nodded. "They all are." Julian winced. "Next time, don't speak. Just run. Let them take me." Cashion looked him in the eye. "There won't be a next time." That night, Cashion returned to the Ember Room alone. He had stolen a brass pin from Livia's desk, thin, sharp, easily hidden. He waited until the room emptied again. Then he carved something into the wall. "Nominum minimus. We remember the names." He lit a silk drape on fire and fled. The fire was small, contained. But the message spread faster than the flames. The next day, every servant in the Domus whispered about it. Some said it was a slave's revenge. Others a ghost. But Livia knew. She called all the boys into the training hall. "Which one of you wrote that?" she demanded, pointing to the wall. No one answered. Julian met her gaze. Maybe it was someone who still had a name. She struck him hard across the face. But when she left, the boys didn't lower their heads. They looked at each other. For the first time they stood like brothers. Julian's back ached for days. The welts had darkened into deep red ribbons, and every movement reminded him of the Ember Room. But something else burned deeper, the hunger to make it matter. Cashion kept guard while Julian rested. He brought him scraps of honeyed bread, cleaned his wounds in silence. But Julian noticed the way Cashion looked at the door now, like it wasn't a wall but a possibility. They both knew what they had to do. Escape was no longer a dream. It was a plan. It began with a statue, an old marble representation of Apollo in the Eastern Garden, chipped and cracked, but still standing tall beside the lattice wall. A servant once told Julian it covered a narrow supply door, long sealed, forgotten, but not locked. One night, while the Domus hosted a banquet for visiting Greek scholars, Julian and Cashion slipped out of their quarters and tiptoed barefoot into the garden. The torchlight was minimal, most servants occupied with wine, laughter, and music echoing from the main hall. The Apollo statue loomed above them. Cashion dug his fingers under the base and pulled. Nothing. Julian pressed on the side, click. A small hinge creaked. A narrow doorway appeared behind the base. Rusted, dusty but real. Inside was a tight passage, musty and dark. It curved sharply and disappeared into shadows. Where does it lead? Cashion whispered. Julian shook his head. Maybe nowhere. But maybe freedom. They couldn't risk it that night. Not yet. But now they had a way out. In the following days they gathered what they could, thin ropes stolen from laundry, bread crusts from the kitchens, and a worn map left in a scholar's scroll pouch. They memorized it by moonlight, alleyways, aqueduct tunnels, slave markets, and the Tiber crossings. They had a route. A door. A chance. Then everything changed. A new boy arrived. Lucio. 8 years old. Hair the color of sand, face pale with shock. He didn't speak for 2 days. Julian saw himself in the boy, the same silence, the same stolen name. They couldn't leave him. But taking a child doubled their risk. We'll have to carry him, Cashion said one night. Or hide him if we run. Julian agreed. We'll wait 1 more week. That week was the longest of their lives. Lucio began to speak in fragments. My father owed taxes, they took me. Cashion sat with him during meal hours, offering extra bread. Julian taught him how to walk silently. Then on the 6th night, everything unraveled. One of the guards, Mauro, caught Lucio slipping out of the sleeping hall after curfew. He dragged him by the arm into the training chamber and raised his fist. Julian was there in seconds. Don't touch him, he said sharply. Mauro turned. You again? Julian stepped in front of Lucio. You want blood? Take mine. Cashion appeared behind them. So will I, he added. The other boys watched. Silent. So. Mauro hesitated. Something had changed. The fear was no longer theirs. It was his. He shoved Julian to the floor but didn't strike him. You're all replaceable, he muttered and left. Julian looked up at the others. And this time he saw not victims, but allies. That night he whispered to Cashion, tomorrow. We go. And Cashion nodded. The statue waited. The passage was ready. But they had no idea what waited outside. They moved just before the 3rd hour of night. Julian held Lucio tightly in his arms, wrapped in a servant's cloak. Cashion carried the stolen rope and flatbread. Their feet were silent on the stone as they crept past the columns, past the lion fountains, and into the garden where Apollo stood like a guardian of secrets. Cashion reached behind the base. Click. The statue shifted. The door opened. The tunnel swallowed them in seconds. Tight, damp, cobwebbed. They moved fast, hearts racing in the dark. The rope served as a tether, keeping them connected as they passed sharp corners and rotting beams. Julian's arms ached from holding Lucio, but he didn't stop. Then a shout behind them. Someone had noticed. Boots. Echoing. Close. Julian whispered, Run. They burst out of the tunnel exit, an iron grate behind an abandoned granary near the slums. Cashion jammed a stone against the door. It wouldn't hold long. Smoke rose behind them. They're burning the tunnels, Cashion gasped. Trying to flush us out. Julian pulled Lucio's hood over his head. Then we disappear. The streets were dark, wet with fog. Rome slept above them, but the underworld was alive. Thieves, beggars, lost souls. Julian had studied the map in his mind. Cut east, past the Temple of Saturn, into the salt merchant's alley, then down to the sewer entrance where the outcasts lived. They reached the alley breathless. A figure blocked their path. Where are you going, boys? The man asked. He wore a black cloak and smelled of vinegar. Julian didn't hesitate. Our master sent us with a message. The man raised a brow. At this hour? Julian stepped forward, voice steady. He's a senator. You want to explain to him why we were late. Pause. Then the man backed away. Cashion exhaled. Where did that come from? Julian kept walking. From not wanting to go back. At the sewer entrance, a metal gate blocked the descent. Cashion reached into his tunic, the pin. The one they had used to carve the wall. With trembling fingers he picked the lock. Click. They slipped below the city. The smell hit them instantly, mildew, rot, and ash. But safety doesn't always smell sweet. In the torchlit caverns they found them. Others, boys, girls, slaves who had escaped, servants who had been discarded, runaways, the hidden children of Rome, faces bruised, spirits shattered, but alive. An old man sat near a fire. He looked at them and asked, "What did you leave behind?" Julian replied, "A palace." The man chuckled. "Then you left nothing." Julian looked down at Lucio, trembling but safe. "No," he said. "We left everything that didn't matter." They were given a corner to rest, water to drink, and a blanket to share. Cashion sat beside Julian. "We made it." But Julian shook his head. "We're not done." He stared at the cracked stone walls, carved with markings, names, prayers. "We're going to go back." Cashion blinked. "What?" "Not to stay," Julian said. "To take more. One by one. Until no one's left inside those silk prisons." Cashion nodded slowly. And from across the chamber someone whispered, "You're the one who wrote on the wall, aren't you?" Julian didn't answer. But the boy smiled anyway. That night, Julian wrote something new with coal on the sewer wall. Not slaves. Not silence. Not anymore. Word spread like fog through the lower districts of Rome. A boy with burned scars on his back had escaped the Domus Aurea. Another, blind in one eye, was pulled from a merchant's villa in the southern quarter. One by one the lost were being reclaimed. The city whispered his name, Julian. A name not given but taken back. And he wasn't alone. Cashion remained at his side, now limping from an injury during one of the extractions. Lucio had begun to smile again, to run barefoot through the sewer halls, laughing in a way he never did in Silk. They called themselves the Memory. Not rebels. Not soldiers. Just boys who refused to be forgotten. Julian kept records, names, ages, regions, dates taken. Every time they saved a child, they etched his real name into the walls of the sanctuary with soot and wine. Some they couldn't reach in time. Others were too broken to speak. But they never stopped. One night, Cashion returned alone from a failed attempt in the northern villa district. Blood on his tunic. His face hollow. "They killed one," he whispered. "A boy from Gaul. He tried to run." Julian didn't speak. He sat beside him in the dark and lit a candle. "What was his name?" he asked. Cashion stared at the flame. He said it once. Just once. "Daxus." Julian nodded. He took a piece of coal and wrote the name on the wall. Then he whispered it again and again until it felt alive. "Daxus. Daxus. Daxus." The room joined him. Every boy, every girl, every broken voice, they all spoke it. A name resurrected. And in that moment, Julian understood something simple and final. They couldn't erase the past. But they could remember it louder than Rome could forget. Years later, Julian stood on a high wall overlooking the city. His back had healed, though the scars remained. Beside him, Cashion now wore a simple leather band on his wrist, not a collar but a symbol of survival. "I dreamed about my mother last night," Julian said. Cashion looked at him. She was standing on the dock. The sun was behind her. "And I wasn't afraid anymore." Cashion took his hand. "You're not that boy anymore." "No," Julian whispered. "But part of me still is. And maybe that part is what makes me fight." Below, the city glowed. Somewhere down there, another boy had just been taken. Another name erased. But not for long. They were coming. And they wouldn't stop. Julian's story is not just about pain, it's about reclaiming what was never supposed to be stolen. Name, dignity, future. For every child forgotten by history, there's someone who can choose to remember. This story moved you, share it. Let the echoes of these stolen childhoods become too loud to silence again. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe every voice, no matter how small, deserves to be heard.